just because you have a great technology or a great set of people or even a great position in the marketplace, you may not tomorrow. Be two things: be humble in your approach to that, and be, to some degree, quite paranoid about what the marketplace and the environment might do to your company.
How did you maintain that team cohesion, the motivation, and strategic focus?
The two things I spent the most time on were
In today's episode, we are diving deep with Dan Jablonsky, a leader who defies the traditional CEO archetype. From nuclear engineer in the Navy to attorney, and now at the helm of Ursa Major, Dan embodies the power of a non-linear career path. With just over 100 days as CEO, he is steering a company at the forefront of hypersonic technology, transforming cutting edge aerospace innovations into strategic business opportunities. Dan's journey is a masterclass in adaptability, having led 4,400 team members through significant transformations at Maxar. He's developed a unique philosophy. Change is the only constant, so you might as well embrace it. His approach to leadership goes beyond traditional management, believes in creating alignment, fostering genuine communication, and building a culture where company values aren't just words on a wall, but a living, breathing part of organizational DNA. At Ursa Major, Dan is driving innovation at lightning speed. We're talking about taking designs from whiteboard to test stand in just 29 days, developing hypersonic engines that can travel over 1,000 nautical miles with over 80% of components additively manufactured. But for Dan, it's not just about cool tech, it's about building a business that can turn innovative potential into real world impact. Welcome, Dan. Now, you've done a lot of things, including some big things very recently. Tell me about your experience at Ursa now.
So I've been the CEO for just over 100 days, and it has been just a fantastic immersion into one of America's soon-to-be great companies, doing hypersonics and solid rocket motors and on-ground and in-space propulsion configurations. We're about 250 people or so, and doing some of the most cutting-edge, neat, new, technologically advanced propulsion in the world. It's a fantastic time to be there and a really exciting place to be.
And you mentioned a couple of different tech innovations pieces. Um, Tell me more about what's getting you really excited today.
Yeah, I think the first thing to think about, and the first thing that I've been focused on, is we build a business, because just having cool tech does not make it in and of itself make a successful business. It's a nice precursor and a nice precondition to get there, but cool tech without a good business case and solid performances just ends up as cool tech. We have some really, really innovative activities going on. One of them is related to hypersonics and hypersonic engine development. And it turns out that while the U.S. developed some of the early technology a few decades ago, we've sort of let it lay dormant for a very long period of time. And the Chinese and the Russians have gone past where America is on hypersonic technologies. And Ursa Major is one of the companies working very hard to fix that, and has actually developed configurations of liquid rocket engines to be able to fly hypersonically, inside the atmosphere, outside the atmosphere, in space, in the atmosphere of the planet, starting and stopping the configurations and going extreme distances of over 1,000 nautical miles. And those engines, over 80% of the content is additively manufactured, or, in common vernacular, 3D printed. So we're building and manufacturing using 3D processes, combustion chambers that can withstand up to 5,000 or 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit in the center configurations. Propulsion machinery. Think about turbofans and those kinds of things that spin it between 50,000 and 65,000 RPMs, making microsecond, sort of adjustments to get to rocket engine light and extremely high performance.
Oh, it sounds impressive. You'd mentioned, hey, we let a bunch of tech lie, and the Russians and Chinese did not, related to hypersonics. Tell me more about that, but also where you're headed with Ursa in terms of bringing that to market.
Yeah. And just to, everybody's kind of cleared, hypersonic is typically defined as in excess of Mach 5.0.
Mach 5.
Yeah. So over 3,300 miles per hour at sea level, which means New York to LA in about an hour. Very, very, very fast speeds. Yeah. Um, and what I'd say is that in the past, NASA has developed some of these technologies, but we probably didn't have like a straight up either military or civilian application for them for some period of time, and we ceased developing those technologies.
We can't make money. We're not using them in the military. So let's stop.
Yeah, pretty much. I think that's what happened, and probably lost some focus. Thought we had plenty of what we needed. Um, Went off and fought the global war on terror for 20 or 30 years, and probably forgot that part of providing for the common defense is also providing for the common defense against great power competition, for the for the United States to meet its strategic aims as well. We're back in great power competition. History did not take a break.
History did not take a break.
Yeah, there were theories in the late '90s and early 2000s that history was over. We'd already come to the fruition of uh, global technology and societies that worked well together, and it turns out the human populations really didn't decide to act that way.
Certainly. Now let's take it back. You're 100 days in at Ursa, but prior to that, you led Maxar through a complex turnaround and then a take private transaction. What are the critical human and strategic elements that determine success when an org faces a big change like that?
I think the most important thing is, and I'll put a broad category out there, and then we'll kind of maybe drill down into what I think some of the really important points are. But the first one is you have to have good leadership, and good leadership means picking the right strategies, picking the right people that are good leaders to work with you, having fantastic communications skills and information up and down the chain, so that you can bring your team along with you, and that you're not, sort of just putting things out there that aren't relevant or that people don't want to adopt and follow. And then the third one, or I'm sorry, the fourth one, but very, very important is a values structure by which to bring people along and by which to measure yourselves.
What to do or not to do based on our company values?
Yeah, it's in, and a lot of companies have value. Just about every company I've ever seen has value statements.
Some are good, some are a little cheesy.
Yeah, they have to be real if you're going to put them in operation.
Yeah, Chat GPT couldn't have just created it for you.
Nah, I don't think so. I mean, ChatGPT just takes a bunch of large language models, and the great thing about ChatGPT is it can get to answers really fast. The bad thing is it just takes all of the information, including the information you don't want, and probably just creates a hybridized value system that's not your set of team's core values.
So make them meaningful.
Yeah, it's really important because if in order for them to be meaningful, people have to believe in them. They have to believe that they are the company's values, and you have to have them in motion. One of the things we did was whenever we had someone that came up to one of my direct reports for personnel for a promotion or a VP or above, we always looked at that promotion and we said, does this person embody the company's values? And if we didn't have a really solid yes answer to that, then we would put the promotion on hold. And that was one way of demonstrating to all of our other teammates throughout the company and throughout the world that the values mattered.
Yeah, you aren't going to move up unless you embrace these.
Exactly. You cannot be a senior executive or a leader at this company if you don't embody the company's values.
Most leaders have this kind of fear of disruption. I think we all have a natural fear of change, but you've, Dan, consistently positioned yourself at this intersection of challenge and opportunity. How do you recognize and leverage moments of potential transformation?
Well, I think whether we fear change and disruption or not, change and disruption are the normal course of life.
Get used to it. Yeah, it's the only constant.
Yeah, they're much more likely to be your normal pattern of activity than a quiet, steady state existence.
Mhm.
So you might as well adopt to it quickly. You might as well embrace it, and you might as well create the set of tools in your toolbox that allow you to not just deal with it, but hopefully thrive in those types of scenarios.
So get the right attitude about it.
You might as well just have the right attitude. You need to be adaptable. You'd better have grit because things will not always go your way. That was one of the core competencies we looked at for our leaders. Do they have grit? Can they get knocked down and get back up and work through really hard things, and keep a positive attitude while they're doing it, and adaptability.
So you'd mentioned grit and adaptability. You've had a much more diverse background than a lot of space tech CEOs we see, from nuclear engineer in the Navy to attorney to GM to managing, 4,400 team members across 20 locations. Tell me about how these three almost separate careers collide, but also how that diversity impacts your decision making.
It is a very, I'll call it, non-traditional background. I was up at the University of Colorado talking to the aerospace students with one of my good friends, Mark Sarangelo.
Go Buffs.
Go Buffs, yeah. Um, and I think that it's good for students or anybody to hear that story. That you know, most and many of us are not out of central casting. We have a background, we have background stories, and those life stories lead to where we are in that present, and then they become adaptable things that might lead into where we end up in the future.
We are not out of central casting. I like that, particularly, owning an exec search firm where you see the wish list and it rarely includes diversity of experience.
That's very true, I'd imagine. I think as starting off life as a naval officer, surface warfare officer, and a Navy nuclear engineer gave me a great foundation for operating in a high pressure, zero fail environment that had a very long legacy of success. So I was able to pattern a lot of my early life lessons from those who had had a great success, both from a technical and an operational and a leadership standpoint. And I think that set me off on a very good path for what the rest of my career became.
Hmm. Certainly. Okay, taking it back one step in terms of these mega teams you've led. When you led 4,400 team members through significant transformation, aka Maxar, how did you maintain that team cohesion, the motivation, and strategic focus? You talked about a little bit about what you look for in selecting the team, but how do you keep it going?
Two things that I spent, uh, and this was kind of a surprise to me. I did not know I would spend this much time on these two things, right? Like, you get to pick strategies, you get to work with your board, you get to work with investors. But the two things I spent the most time on were my leadership teams, not just my direct reports, but the leadership teams throughout the company. We as leaders of larger organizations, and Maxar was pretty big, not the biggest organization out there, but we actually don't do anything ourselves, right? We don't make anything, we don't design anything, we don't produce anything, we don't take care of customers on a day-to-day basis. Other teammates do those kind of things. And
That's an interesting way for a CEO to frame it.
well, if your teammates are poorly led, or they're not engaged, or they don't understand what the strategy is,
Mhm.
it's
You're
really
calling the
hard for
plays, they're doing the work.
well, it's really hard for them even they're calling the plays a lot of times.
Mhm.
It's harder for them to do their daily activities. It's harder for them to be at peak performance and peak excellence, which is what we really want to have happen if you're going to have great leadership teams across the spectrum. And so I spent an awful lot of time with my leadership team, with the next level leaders and the next level leaders, um, really making sure that we were all aligned. Do we understand the strategy? Do we understand what success looks like? How do we work together? How do we communicate? How do we formalize leadership programs? And what are all the informal things we do to make those great? And then the second one was communication. I spent an awful lot of time, and all of those leaders did as well, making sure that our teammates were understanding and aware of what we were trying to accomplish. 4,400 people all pulling in different directions is massive entropy, which is not the
Mhm.
state of where most companies get success. But 4,400 people that are aligned on the correct objectives, that understand and can communicate up well and across each other, and have a passion for success, can do amazing things. And we work really hard on both of those fronts.
So we all hear the horror stories, particularly uh, as a second gen headhunter, about poor communication. And you said, hey, fast or exemplary communication is a prerequisite for navigating change. What kind of tactics would you give to a first time CEO or GM that is really looking to figure out what great communication means? How do you know when you hit it right?
I, and full transparency and honesty, right? Like we always didn't hit it right. I have a long list of where it didn't work out as well as I would have liked it to.
I'd imagine from your submarine days, you're used to getting feedback. In the military, the feedback is quick and rapid.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, it's a very high pressure, no fail environment most of the time. And even when you're doing things that seem, designed to be rigorously quality level, like running nuclear power plants, those nuclear power plants are designed to drive ships and submarines into harm's way. And so that's a very different dynamic and dichotomy, right? You've got a very high reliable system, but you want to take it into a scenario where it's a very dangerous environment out on the seas into a threat environment. Um, but I'm thinking you asked about communication, and I want to kind of come back to that. I think the first real good lesson for someone that wants to communicate well is be genuine. Don't it's not a set of checklists and things that if I do this and I do this and I do this, then I'm sure people will pick this up. An awful lot of communication is based on a trust environment. If I'm speaking with you today and moving my hands or I'm writing a memo or I'm doing anything that might be a way that we communicate with each other, do you trust what I'm saying? Do you trust that I have the right strategy and direction for the company? Do you trust that I care about you? Because if you don't have any of those things, then you're already down to probably 30 or 40% paying attention to me, already thinking about other things, even subconsciously. And we're not actually communicating in a way that will be rigorous and beneficial, I think.
So put
And
down the phone, focus, move the hands, good eye contact, gain that trust.
yeah, those are tactics. I think the one that's even a precursor to that is, what's this about? Do we have something that we actually care about together? Building a great company, doing something amazing for customers, seeing a new technology adapted by a wide number of people. And if that's the case, how might we go about putting that into place with each other? And do we trust each other in our relative positions and job opportunities to be able to go do that? So thinking about it, even from that, before we get to the tactics of, did I have eye contact? Am I engaged? Am I focused on what this conversation is? Actually, what is the conversation is the first precursor, I think.
From DigiGlobe to Maxar and now to Ursa, you've consistently been at the forefront of this reinvention. We've all seen some crash and burns as well. What separates leaders who successfully transform orgs from those who get left behind?
As an initial matter, no company has a predetermined right to exist.
No company has a predetermined right to exist. We're underlining that one. Tell me more.
Well, it's very important to understand that just because you have a great technology or a great set of people or even a great position in the marketplace, you may not tomorrow. So, what is it that you want to do out into the future? How do you want to take care of customers? What type of things do you want to do to create a financially and successful and relevant company? And in addition to that, who are your competitors by which you can do that? You, when I say that, and when I say you don't have a predetermined right to exist, what I really mean is be two things: be humble in your approach to that, and be to some degree quite paranoid about what the marketplace and the environment might do to your company.
You can't see too many threats,
And you can't be paralyzed. The first principle of strategy is action, so you always have to be moving.
but don't be overly optimistic.
Yeah, and you have to be moving with purpose, and you have to be moving, always trying to be better. Even if you think you had a pretty good game, you have to be better at the next game because your customers will demand it, and the competition will try and take those prizes away from you.
So you've walked in these shoes of transformation. What was the biggest learning moment as you were going through some of those change moments?
I've had a lot of learning moments, and the relative successes and failures I think that have gone along with those. The The one that's most pertinent and most important to me is among the peer set that I have, my mentors that I've worked with for many years, my board members, my investors, my teammates. Um, are we are we proud of the way we've acted, and do we think we've left everything on the field in terms of engaging and competing in that environment? And if you can, yeah, and if you can approach the days and the quarters and the conversations and the ups and the downs that way, what I've found is that you have the resiliency and the sort of emotional headset to keep staying in the fray and with quite a bit of humor because that helps us all get through it as well. Uh, take on that next set of challenges and try and get that next thing flying or that next item of technology across the line, and because it's relevant and your customers need it, they really will benefit from it. So that to me, that those are the things that keep it very honest and relevant for me.
And I know we were talking about hypersonic specifically early on, but coming back to that piece, how do you maintain those core competencies while driving this radical innovation? And how do you know if you're leaving your fundamental, you know, uniqueness as a business and or just chasing what everybody else is?
So and maybe just to kind of a broader concept here, right? Like we're very, very focused on hypersonics capabilities. We're also very focused on a couple of other propulsion and aerospace and defense capabilities, like solid rocket motors. Solid rocket motors, for example, in Ursa, were a startup within a startup 18 months ago.
18 months ago. It's fresh.
That's crazy fast, right? Um, One of the things I love about the team is that passion they have for innovation, for trying something new, for seeing if they can do it better than anybody else has done it. So it's not a me too, but it's a sort of a groundbreaking way to do something. We've gone from, uh, just as an example, in terms of innovation, we've had people bring in ideas and concepts for solid rocket motors at the whiteboard design. Our teams have developed 3D conceptual plans and software models for those in relatively short periods of time. We've printed those configurations out in Youngstown, Ohio, on our world-class 3D printing centers of excellence, gotten them back, done post-processing to them, and had them on the test stand in three different configurations in under 29 days. As you know, in the aerospace and defense world, is light speed, right? To go from zero, a white sheet concept, to an article doing thousands of degrees Fahrenheit out on a test stand and working. It's phenomenal, and that's the kind of passion the teams bring to it.
That is lightning fast.
Yeah, we've been told by some that we're actually moving too fast. They haven't even sent us RFPs yet, and I'm like, well, kind of get used to it. That's how Ursa Major acts. We
So as a business, one of your core capabilities is speed. Yeah. And
speed and adaptability. Yes, and using those same process in the same manufacturing cells, we've done anything from 2 inches to 22 inches in configuration. Um, Going on those white sheet designs. So it's not like we were just taking, a little slightly different hybrid on the same tooling and die sets. These are radically different configurations, diameters. We put them through the 3D, modeling and printing process, which is also one of the success points of the company because complexity is essentially free in the 3D environment. You don't pay for additional complexity because the 3D printers handle a lot of that inside the processing.
so before I let you go, Dan, you're 100 days in as CEO, and I wanted to find out what we are going to be celebrating in the next 100 days.
We're going to be celebrating an awful lot of fly more, fly faster. That's one of our core objectives throughout the next couple
Fly
of
more,
years.
fly faster.
Fly more, fly faster. Fly hypersonics at the edge of technology. Fly space configurations and solid rocket motors in an adaptable configuration, better and faster and more productively than anybody else on the planet. And that's what we're up to.
Thank you so much. This has been fun.
Thanks, Catherine.